March of 2020, my students were asking if we were going to close school due to COVID. I said, no, it's not like we live in the snow belt. Then it was March 13th. Schools closed and the way we do school changed forever. On this show, we're going to talk about the ways in which schools and community have had to pivot and continue to pivot in a constantly changing reality. This is Pivot.
Brown, and I am here with some of our guest teachers today for one of our first segments on Pivot, our new podcast. So today we're going to be talking about assessment. First, I'm going to go around and introduce our teachers. If you would, just kind of say your name, maybe how long you've been teaching, what subject area you teach. That'd be great.
I'm Tara Darlington. I teach English 9, English 9 honors, and I've been teaching for 26 years, I think.
My name is Emily McGill. I am a social studies teacher here. This is my 10th year and 10th year at HSE as well.
I'm Amanda Cole. I teach math and science, Algebra 2 and Earth Space Science. This is my 16th year.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. So today we're going to be talking about assessment. What is it? Why we do it? How we do it? So first I want to ask, have you guys ever had that dream where like you're back in school and you have to take a test that you haven't studied for? Have you guys had that dream?
No, but I have the one where I have to teach a lesson and I have not read the book.
You have not read the book?
Mine's more teacher oriented.
I have some like a variation where or I've actually already graduated or passed college and I'm like, why do I have to be here to take this test? So I think about some of that panic and that fear and think about there is some of that test anxiety. We know that that's a thing. But assessment, as we know, is more than just a test. So that's what I want to start with. Like, what is assessment to you? Like, what do you think it is? Why do we do it?
I think for me, like assessment it's both on the teacher side, but also on the student side. It's an opportunity for kids to show us what they have learned, how they've learned it, what skills they've gotten, and it's their chance to get feedback from us. And then for us, we can see, okay, what skills have the kids mastered? What are they still struggling with? And then like, okay, do we need to go back and reteach anything? Like, are the kids ready to progress to the next level that we need them to?
Yeah. I also think that as a team, figuring out what your assessment is going to be is a method of putting your team all on the same page as far as what do we want our students to be able to do. So creating assessment actually sometimes clarifies for the teacher, what am I teaching? What do I want it to look like? What does success look like? So I think clarifying it for a team sometimes is part of it as well.
I was just going to say like a knowledge check of some kind, both for your students and for yourself, to see what have they learned, how is this going, but then also sort of like what Emily said, how does this reflect on what I've done? Have I taught this part well? Does this part maybe need some reteaching? How is that going?
So talk to me more, Tara. You kind of mentioned like, even having some of those things in mind, like when you design from the beginning, like how do you plan what your assessment is going to be, like, and what kind of assessment it's going to be? Like, talk to me about some of those things.
Yeah. I think really, especially with, the changes with COVID and the changes to school, it's more important now than ever to streamline exactly what you're trying to get out of your students.
I see heads nodding.
Yeah. So you really, because there are things that have to go by the wayside. And so I think it's really, really important for a teacher to be very clear on what it is they really, really need these students to be able to do. And then secondly, what product can they produce for me that's going to show me those skills the best? And then I also think that the kids, this is a difficult time for them with the schedule and all the changes. And so it puts them at ease when you can tell them, here, this is what I'm going to assess you on. This is what it looks like. And you tell them that from the very beginning so that there's never a moment where they're thinking, ooh, where is this going? Or am I going to fail later? They know what they're going to have to do from the very start. And so it gives meaning to what you're doing on a daily basis because they can see where it's going and how it's going to relate to their assessment.
I like how you differentiate between the product and the skills. 'Cause I think that's something too that can be a mind shift, that it's not necessarily that we're planning this project or that we're planning this product that we're going to create, but it is like, here are the skills I want. Now what product or project can help students demonstrate those skills?
I think it's important to vary what that end product or what assessment you're going to do. In math and science, obviously we have a lot of numbers and things, but it's not going to reach everyone if I just do a test every time. So how am I going to be able to reach those students who are really great artists or who really love to read? And so how can they produce the same information without just taking a test every time or without just doing math problems?
Can you give me an example of that?
Yes, I was just thinking about it today. So in math, we're doing piecewise functions, and so we took a quiz over it today, and then on Monday, we're starting a project about that, where they'll still have to produce math, they'll still have to produce a graph, but a large portion of the grade is looking more at the real world side of things, making it artistic, making it look nice, professional, for those people who maybe get that test anxiety and maybe understand the math, but just can't produce it on a rote multiple choice quiz.
And I think building off of what Amanda just said, one thing that, maybe coming out of all of this is that we do rethink how we assess. Like Amanda said, having different avenues for kids with, kids who don't test well, but there's other ways that you are able to kind of share your knowledge and things like that. And, maybe, kind of shifting away from the traditional multiple choice test, how do we do that? And like I'm in history, so it's kind of similar. Like it's a lot of, dates and rote memorization. So like I've kind of shifted it also to go with real world. Like how can we get the kids to really reflect on what is happening in their world around them and be able to write and kind of make those connections that they have.
Now, Tara, you mentioned that you build assessments so that constantly you're working towards kind of what that end goal is, really beginning with the end in mind. What do you mean like as you work in progress? So we know then that end in mind is kind of that summative assessment. How are you working in those formative assessments along the way?
Well, the formative assessments that we do, and ideally you've got to make them make sense to the kids. So some of the things that we do along the way are literally skills that they're going to have to demonstrate in the final assessment. So, and I'll tell them, this is literally the same prompt that you're going to get on your final assessment. But we're breaking it down and we're only looking at this one small aspect of doing the final assessment. And so it gives it really a lot of meaning for the students because they realize, oh, this is my practice time. And then they also realize, and I tell them, the feedback I give you is your roadmap to doing better on the final assessment. And I even, encourage them to pull those assessments out and look at them as they're doing the final assessment. So they can kind of look at the feedback. It just gives the feedback more meaning along the way in the unit because they know that I'm giving them individualized information on how to improve and what to improve.
What about like other content areas? How do you incorporate formative assessment into your subjects?
I think just like those kind of daily conversations, daily checks, again, like Tara said, it's all about giving the kids feedback. It's giving them practice, like, never having the first time they try a skill be on that assessment. Like the kids need to be able to do that. And really taking moments to scaffold. And like, I have an end goal in mind of where I want them to be. And it's like, okay, let's do piece by piece by piece by piece. How do we get you up to that skill? So the formative assessments, just, giving the kids a little bit of feedback, allow them to talk to each other and kind of talk out the skills that they're learning.
In math, it's those homework problems that you're giving or, that you're working out in groups or things. And you can tell as the teacher when you grade their homework or when you have a group discussion, if they're not responding to you, then you can tell right away, okay, that's something that we need to work on and we need to reteach that. Same thing with science, just slowly scaffolding those things, constantly thinking about you already know what the end game is going to be. So thinking, what do I need to do to prepare you for that?
Great. Well, we are about out of time. So before we go, though, I want to ask one last question. And that is, this is going to be a tough one. I'm going to put you on the spot. Like, what is a failure that you have experienced in assessment that you have then learned from?
That would be the assessment you don't want to grade because you don't know what it means. Like you don't even know why it's valuable yourself. So
Mine is being tied to the calendar where I've said, okay, I'm going to test on this date. We're doing it. And then they are just not ready. And I've given it anyway.
So what'd you do after? Like, what'd you do?
Own up to it and say, this was a failure on both of our parts. You guys weren't ready. I pushed you too hard. You know, as soon as I graded 3 of them, I recognized that. And, you know, in life, there's always chances to try it again. They're only in school do you get one chance. And so just owning up to that and saying, we're going to step back and we're going to try it again.
And that's okay. I know someone mentioned earlier, like that assessment data is a chance to be able to reteach. And so that would be one of those learning moments where you weren't ready, and that's okay.
For me, I think it would be looking at an assessment where, kind of like what Tara was mentioning earlier, like what we taught and like what I expect the product to be doesn't match up with like how I got them there. And you're like, oh, we veered left when we needed to go right. And again, kind of with that, it's like Amanda said, like you own up to it, and we can redo it. We do a different type of assessment with that, and then going forward, I know you got to work backwards to be able to get them where you want them to be.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate getting this opportunity to speak with you.